Good morning, early Monday morning. Welcome everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We've had a lot of news in the last week, really, with John Calipari in week two on the job with the Arkansas Razorbacks in terms of commitments, visits, stuff to go over, stuff to recap and review. Then we've got plenty to talk about on the horizon here as we begin week three. But once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please hit the subscribe button. Look down there, hit that sucker. Like if you want, hit subscribe. Appreciate you joining us for our content. The last time we were on is early. I think it was about this time on Thursday morning, and we knew those visits were coming in for Boogie Flynn and Billy Richmond, the two five-star decommitments from Kentucky with Flynn, a second McDonald's All-American that Calipari has recruited from that Kentucky Class 2 Arkansas. We know Carter Knox a week ago today committed. Then their visits began later that evening, Thursday evening, when they arrived, Billy Richmond and Boogie Flynn. Let's see, that was Wednesday night, excuse me. We talked about, they arrived Wednesday night. We talked about it early Thursday morning that they were on campus. And then Thursday night, Boogie Flynn was officially off the board and committed. Friday morning, it was Billy Richmond. So Arkansas doubled its commitment list. If you go back, and so we're going to talk more about what's coming next. But if you look back now, Calipari introduced on a Wednesday. The following Monday was when the first commitment came off the board at 5:05 p.m. Central Time. Big Z's Zvonimir Ivicic, the 7-2 transfer from Kentucky, a freshman last year. Then we waited another week to another Monday for Carter Knox. That was last Monday. So the precedent so far has been there's been a commitment announcement every Monday since Calipari was formally announced as Arkansas's head coach. Could today be another day where we see at least one commitment off the board? I think it's very likely. Certainly, I can't guarantee that and say with 100% certainty, but based on the track record, based on having two weekend visitors, I think it's a really good chance. I'll say more likely than not, I'll put it that way, that Arkansas sees another commitment and gets that fifth commitment. 4 players committed, going back through those names: Carter Knox, Boogie Flynn, Billy Richmond from the 2024 high school class. That's half of Kentucky's class. 2 of them McDonald's All-Americans, all 3 of them top 25 rated players. So based on how you look at recruiting rankings, the composite rankings have both Carter Knox ranked 22nd in the composite rankings, but top 25 across the board. Same with Billy Richmond, number 25 in the composite. Both of those are composite 5-stars. ESPN has Boogie Flynn as its 15th rated recruit, a 5-star there. So you've got 3 5-stars. If you could technically say that's accurate when you look back on it. And then, of course, Big Z out of the portal did some really good things in 15 games last year. So you've got 4 players, along with Lawson Blake, the 6'10 center walk-on from Fayetteville. You've technically got enough guys now to play somebody, play a scrimmage against the managers, or play the Harlem Globetrotters as a joke. I tweeted the other day, but when you go from 0 players, with the exception of Lawson Blake there, 0 scholarship players, now you're up to 4. I think Arkansas is going to add to that number as soon as today. We're going to talk about the weekend visitors. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, get caught up on some things today as we get into this. But I thought it was very interesting that once you get these commitments, what's next? You want to see that they've signed their letters of intent. And we went through the order. Monday, it was Carter Knox committing. Then Thursday night, it was Boogie Flynn. And then Friday morning, the first morning commitment of the 4 was Billy Richmond. But the way the University of Arkansas actually announced the signings was in reverse order. It was the actual reverse order. So Richmond was announced first, then Boogie Flynn, then Carter Knox, at the end of the week through the weekend. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We know Big Z has done his financial aid agreement stuff. Remember, the high school players, I don't know exactly when high schools finish up, but most of them are still in school and are back on their high school campuses until school finishes out. And so Big Z's been on campus. We know these got Carter Knox and Boogie Flynn and Billy Richmond were in for visits. So I'm not even sure what Kentucky's semester breaks look like and where Big Z is and finishing up there. But Arkansas's got 4 players. I think when we look at the visitors through the weekend, everybody's excited about more big men, because you started off with Big Z. You had backcourt players, guards and wings, Knox, Flynn, Richmond. Focus on the backcourt when you looked at the weekend lineup of visitors. We talked about this on Thursday. morning when we came on. Last time we were on, Jonas Adu coming in. I told you that Brandon Garrison, I was hearing he was coming in for a visit. He later confirmed with me, yeah, I'll be there around 2 o'clock on Sunday. Adu was to come in on Saturday. I've looked at Adu's recruiting. You know, he visited Baylor the weekend before. Then he visits Arkansas. Reportedly going to take a visit to North Carolina. That's his home state school, the Tar Heels home state school. And he also has Alabama reportedly in his Final Four. When I went back and looked at it, there are a lot of thought that with Jeremy Roach from Duke, the guard, off the board to Baylor, that Baylor was in great shape with Adu. That may still be the case. However, he didn't commit to Baylor after that visit. He visited Arkansas. All right, so a couple of things I've noticed is he was one of those guys, and there aren't many, that doesn't even post something on his Instagram or somewhere on social media, just that he's arrived to a location for a visit. Everything's more hush-hush with him. Not that there's a lot of fanfare on all these other visits, but most players, including Brandon Garrison on Sunday when he arrived in the afternoon for his visit, posted something. So I'm not trying to get you to read too much into that. I think it's just been a little bit extra quiet in terms of how much of a presence he's even had on social media. Maybe these are all about business trips for him. I think for most of these players, obviously the things that were more important than posting what they put on their Instagram. But still, I found his recruitment a little bit interesting because John Calipari on Saturday in game 2 of the doubleheader against Florida threw out the first pitch. I saw some speckling, just little places here and there where fans, someone said that he was there. Media I talked to did not spot Jonas Adu at that game. That doesn't mean he wasn't there. And a lot of times when a player's at a public event like that, where the team he's visiting is playing maybe another sport, but all the fans are very familiar with recruits, and you've got John Calipari there as well. Usually you see some photographs emerge on social media, Facebook, somewhere. I didn't see any of those. That doesn't mean he wasn't there. I just think that's interesting. If he was in town, in fact, for the visit, I have no reason to say that he isn't. I just find it interesting that if he was at a game like that, I didn't see any photo evidence of that. I'm not trying to forensically break it down that he didn't visit. All I'm saying is I just find it a little bit interesting. Maybe he wasn't there. Maybe he was. Maybe he was only briefly there. No one took a picture of him. Maybe they did a real good job of veiling a 6'11" forward from Tennessee, who Razorback fans knew were coming in for a few days. Okay, so I got that out of my system. We know Brandon Garrison was on campus for his visit. He told me he would be there. He told me he'd be there in the afternoon. Told me he was coming around 2 o'clock. He posted around, I think, sometime between 3 and 4 from Fayetteville, so we know he was there. 6'11" guys. Adu, we know he's an all SEC guy last year, all SEC second team, made the all SEC defensive team, 11 points, over 7 rebounds, nearly 2 blocks per game, only 25 minutes per game. And so when you look at his numbers, over 51% from the field, low 60s at free throw line, but you understand this guy is active. He moves really well in transition and half court sets. And he's an opportunistic scorer, rebounder, rim protector, alter shots. He's really good at both ends, hence being all SEC second team. When you look at his numbers, they look like second team numbers. When you look at his impact, sometimes I thought he was first team. He certainly was in Fayetteville. 23 points, 12 rebounds. It was a beatdown. Arkansas had no answers for Jonas Adu. Brandon Garrison, 6'11" center, freshman last year at Oklahoma State, 2023 McDonald's All-American. And you look at his numbers, 7.5 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.5 blocks, 1.5 assists, playing 2 fewer minutes per game than Adu. 22.6, started most of the games, had 3 games or 20 or more points. Each of those games where he produced like that, scoring, Oklahoma State won. A couple of those were upsets over ranked teams, Baylor and BYU. And then they also beat West Virginia when he had 20 plus. He had 1 double-double on the season. He's not been a heavy rebounder as a freshman. He was not, but he did have 1 double-double. I think he had 2 or 3 games with 10 or more rebounds, but 1 double-double early in non-conference play against South Carolina State. I think 11 points, 10 rebounds. So there you go with Brandon Garrison. He's a guy, I think both of these guys, getting into some information here, I think, and I've been saying this, that Arkansas would probably get one of these guys. I still believe that. I think we could see that as soon as today, an announcement. However, and this is just putting things together on information, just kind of trying to build up, some source information. John Calipari is approaching this and preparing as though he's getting both. Now, make of that what you will. I think that's interesting, and I think if you look at anybody that could sell two guys that want that that want to be profiled on that front line, it's him because he's done it before. He's done it multiple times at Kentucky. I've referenced some of that stuff. The easiest reference for me is going back when he had 3, 6, 10 guys who are NBA guys and first round draft picks, high draft picks. When you go back to Karl Anthony Towns, Willie Cauley-Stein, and Trey Lyles, he's had more than just that. More top-notch, top-shelf big men play together, and so he's a guy that can recruit that way. Is that an ambitious goal, or is it a realistic goal? I can't answer that. I can't answer that. Going off Calipari's track record, it's a realistic goal. NIL changes things. Being in a new place, as good as Cal's brand is, I think we need to pay attention to that just a little bit when we're talking about portal recruiting. We've seen what he's done with these high school guys. I told you guys the other day, I don't see him bringing in these high school guys for visits right now for this roster, guys that were already committed and signed with him or committed to him, bringing them on campus at this point unless they were in the bag on the docket and on board to go ahead and sign. And so that's what played out. I told you there'd be 4. There were 4 on board currently. 2 of those are already off the board, and we'll go through the other names here in a little bit and get into some John L. Davis talk, Jordan Burks. Right now we're talking about the big men who just visited. And so I think Arkansas is going to get one of them. I think Arkansas is in great shape to get one of those guys. If I had to throw out a prediction, if it's just one, I'd say their chances are probably better with Brandon Garrison. He's already visited OU. He's visited Texas. Considering a visit to Kentucky, I was told. We'll see if that's anything that actually plays out. But he was on campus. And so I would say if you're only going to get one, I'd push my chips in the middle for Garrison as being the best shot at that. Now, that doesn't mean that Arkansas won't get one and it's a due and not Garrison. And it certainly doesn't mean that both of them, that Calipari can't get both. Listen, I've got some of the source information I have is coming from behind the scenes and some procedural stuff behind the scenes that I talked about a few days ago. I've used that phrase, I phrased it that way. And so based on that, I think he's preparing to get both. We'll see if he gets both. But again, I think Arkansas gets one of them. I think we could hear either one today. I think we'll get a commitment announcement. I think it's more likely than not. Let me say it that way, more likely than not, based on not only the last 2 Mondays going into the week with a commitment rolling off. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I throw that in there as a little bit, but also because there's already guys that I've said are on board who have not announced publicly. And so one of those is Jordan Burks out of Kentucky, freshman last year. We've talked a lot about him, little used guy, 20 games played, I think around 7 minutes per game. Not a ton of production from him, but man, his upside's really there. Big time scorer and overtime elite before he went to Kentucky. Yeah, I'm going to get into some of these other guys Arkansas's has been recruiting out of the portal. I see some of the comments coming up. But Jordan Burks is a guy that, I'd reported about a week ago that he'd been out, Calipari had been out to dinner with his family. Later learned, I was able to confirm that was in Fayetteville. And so he had been on campus, had been in Fayetteville. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see a commitment announcement there publicly. And so I think Jordan Burks, 6'8", 6'9", I've seen different reports on his size, really lengthy guy. And again, he did some good things. He really helped solidify Kentucky's front line early in the year. Big Z wasn't available. There was some injury stuff going on, and he helped fill in on the front line. He's versatile. He can defend threes. He's a 3-4 combo. And again, we just need to see what Calipari actually brings to the roster. But I think Jordan Burks will be one of those guys. And he's one that I've reported the other day that's on board. So with Fland and Richmond officially on board, those were 2 of the names I gave you. Burks is one of those. The next one's John L. Davis. Now, there's more stuff coming out of the weekend. I think the Kentucky fans are starting to pound their chest a little bit. They're feeling good about that. And here's what I'll tell you. I've got no new information contrary to what I told you guys the other day. I feel like he's one of 4 that were on board based on some of the procedural stuff behind the scenes. I've seen nothing to reverse that or change it, but I've given you the caveats, and I've told you this is more nuanced than the other ones. These are situations when you're talking about one of the top portal guys in the country. NIL is not only going to play a factor, maybe more so with someone like him than even some of the high school guys, even some of the McDonald's All-Americans, but he's also in the NBA draft pool. And so you got a lot of things about to happen in May with dealing with the NBA draft. You've got the G League Combine coming up. What does that mean? Well, they usually invite 40 to 50 players that were not invited to the NBA draft combine. And those the G League, they call it an elite camp. It's basically their version of a combine. Goes for 2 days, and some of the top performers from that get invited over and carry over to the actual NBA draft combine that starts a couple of days later. They kind of they kind of run into each other. The G League goes 2 days, then the NBA draft combine's 4 or 5 days, and they just kind of run in succession on this near the same location. And so all that will be happening in mid-May. We need to see who all is invited. A guy like John L. Davis, the all everything guard, 6'4" guard out of Florida Atlantic, highly coveted guy, arguably the top portal guy. We'll see what his opportunities are. We'll see what he wants to do with that. If you go back just a year ago, Grant Nelson kind of kept things quiet. He put himself in the portal, made sure he made that deadline, and then he went through the draft process. He went through to see what it was, and toward the end is when he withdrew from that and then started taking visits. Source information was kind of coming out that he'd really already settled on Alabama. I remember Arkansas's coaching staff, Nelson's brother had told everybody, kind of stay back. He really wants to focus on the draft, doesn't want to have a lot of recruitment while he's doing that. Arkansas respected that. It got out to me later that Alabama found a way in there and kind of was working that before he, formally withdrew from the draft. Make of that what you will. You got it, you do everything, you pull out all the stops to get guys. And so Alabama did a good job there. But having said all that, let's see what John L. Davis does in terms of waiting on what does he need to learn? How long is it going to take him? Is he waiting to see about these combine invites? I haven't seen a ton of information out there regarding that stuff yet as we wrap up April here. So we'll start to see that. Does he go through that entire process? The deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft, which is in late June, the deadline to withdraw is the end of May, actually a month from today, May 29th. So this may be a wait and see thing. I talked about this in terms of being a private commitment. The other caveat I gave you was schools are going to continue to come after him. Even if he made it public. Arkansas had this with the last coaching staff. Isaiah Moss out of Iowa, coming out of a high major, committed to Eric Musselman, signed a financial aid agreement publicly. That whole thing was made public, that he committed to Arkansas, the whole thing. And then he vacated, and Bill Self in Kansas ended up winning out and flipping him. These financial aid agreements are not the same as national letters of intent. National letters of intent, players get out of them all the time. We saw it with the Kentucky players. It's easier to do now, but it's still a formality. You can't just sign another letter of intent. You have to ask for a release. It has to be granted. Then you can move on. With the financial aid agreements, it doesn't work that way. The school is bound by it up to a certain degree. Players are not. They can sign as many as they want. It's where they enroll. So he's got NBA draft possibilities. He's got pro possibilities. I'll give you an example. Look at Ricky Council. He was coming out. He didn't get drafted, but he got a quick two-way deal with the Philadelphia 76ers on draft night, and earned his way into not only the two-way deal, but he earned his way in his opportunities playing both in the G League, and then when he got opportunities with the Sixers during the regular season. And he got what was effectively a rookie deal on 4 years if he were a second-round pick. So you never know what motivates a guy to go ahead and move on to the pro level. Even if they know maybe I might not get drafted, I'm going to bet on myself and give myself a chance. You can make good money on those two-way deals based on how much time you spend on the NBA part of that, and then give yourself a chance to actually earn a contract. So you never know what a John L. Davis is thinking in terms of how long he wants to ride that horse before deciding to return to college. If it's college, based on what I'm told, the private commit is in play. I believe the reporting that Calipari was out to see him week before last at the end of the week, so less than 2 weeks ago, when he went out to Montverde Academy in Florida to see Liam McNeely, the five-star who decommitted from Indiana. By the way, recently committed to UConn. We took him out of our Hogville over at HogvilleNET and our recruiting tracker. All right, 20 minutes in. Thank you again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live Monday morning. I appreciate you joining me. Please hit the subscribe button down there. It's there. Go ahead and do that. But John L. Davis, again, if Calipari went and saw him, which I believe, the procedural stuff behind the scenes looks to me like it's heading this way. what we've seen portal players in the past commit without visiting yet. They do the virtual stuff and all that. That was under the previous regime. So far, guys have come to campus. However, the high school guys you almost never see make commitments until they visit. Portal guys have done it. Just last year, Arkansas's had multitude of them. Just last year, it was Keon Minifield Jr. committed to Arkansas and took his official visit later out of the portal. So I don't know how much of a priority that is to get him on campus for Calipari to go ahead and let something be announced. Or is anything get announced for a while until he goes through the pro process? Or if we hear a visit's upcoming, maybe that's how we know the commitment's about to be announced and the signing of the financial aid agreement. And remember, once you make it public, it probably lessens the likelihood that there would be a flip later. But you're always paying attention. Do they make it to campus when it's time to move in and start the earliest possible semester, get enrolled, which would be summer school 1? We know all programs want their players in. Usually that's the end of May. I mentioned May 29th is that deadline to withdraw from the NBA draft if you want to return to college. Well, that's around the time Memorial Day weekend is, and you trickle into that first week of June when summer session 1 starts at school, and you've got most, if not all, if you can, of your players in there. It may not work out that way. It doesn't always. There's always, 1, 2, or 3 things that get resolved later. Sometimes you make late additions in the summer to your roster, and it just doesn't work out that way. We had several of those instances last year with Arkansas, by the way. So, again, I don't know enough about Calipari's process to know exactly when we might see a John L. Davis commitment announcement made. And you've got to remember the pro opportunity is a real thing. I went through some of the deadlines, what some of the considerations might be, how that might impact when you hear something or don't, or why you don't anytime soon. Also, other schools trying to flip him. NIL is a huge thing right now, and a guy like him comes at a premium. Everybody's scrambling to get an impact guy like that. Look what he did 2 years ago in leading Florida Atlantic to the Final Four. I mean, no one saw that coming, but he really splashed there. And then he had a huge season this past year. Yeah, FAU didn't do well in the NCAA tournament. He didn't have the greatest of games. Hit his average 18 points, but struggled in that game. Had a lot of turnovers, whatever. Those things can happen. It's a one game. You look at his body of work, you understand why he's arguably the top rated guy out there. Speaking of John L. Davis, again, the Kentucky fan base seems to think there's some momentum going their way. I can't speak to that. I can only speak to the information I've gathered so far. Coming into this week, nothing's changed on that. All right. So, but again, this is recruiting. And until something's made public, you don't feel as close to 100% as you can get. And especially with transfers, you want to know they're on campus and have actually enrolled, because they can flip without even needing the formality of getting released from any document they've signed. Okay, so we've kind of gone through the guys that I've talked about who, as of Thursday morning, I had them as on board. 2 of them are official. I think Jordan Burks, it's a matter of time. Maybe he comes off today. Who knows? Something would have to go weird there, and Calipari change his mind for that not to happen. I think he's in the mix. And then John L. Davis, I went through that again. His is more complicated. It's more nuanced, and you've got more things in play there. But we'll see. We'll see. Something could splash on that in favor of Arkansas today, too. Why not, right? We just don't know. Talked about the weekend visitors. I think Arkansas is going to get one of the 2 at minimum. I think Calipari is prepared. He's preparing to take both, to get both. All right, so there were some other rumors about DJ Wagner, the 2023 McDonald's All-American. Played for Calipari as a freshman last year. That was a rich, loaded freshman backcourt. Then you had Antonio Reeves, big-time scorer. It was a crowded, talented backcourt. And DJ Wagner was probably the guy, but he was dealing with a high ankle sprain. He was a guy that didn't have the seasons that the other ones did. That's obvious. 2 of those freshmen are arguably top 10 picks in the upcoming NBA draft. There's a lot of complaints that it's a weak draft. Thoughts maybe DJ Wagner would test it. We haven't really seen anything. I think the deadline to get in the draft actually was April 27th. So I think we just missed that. If I've got that date correct, I have not seen anywhere that he did put his name in the draft pool. So, but I did see where he's visiting. He was taking a visit to Southern Cal. Now, I've talked about some of the procedural stuff behind the scenes that I got wind of a few days ago. His name was not one of the names I was given as a procedural thing in the works that leads me to believe one of the next steps is he's on board or about to commit to Arkansas. That doesn't mean that that's not going to happen or hasn't happened since I got my information. I'm kind of waiting for the early part of the week here, and we're not in the business hours yet because I came on here early to kind of refresh, if you want to put it this way, with my source information and see if there are any more names added into that mix. So he was not one of them. It doesn't mean that he won't end up at Arkansas. It just means that for whatever reason, out of 8 names total that I've gotten so far on that, he wasn't one of those 8. That doesn't mean that that won't flip or change. I don't know what's going to happen there. Maybe he commits to Eric Musselman and USC. Arkansas recruited him out of high school, even though it was a long shot and not likely. Most folks knew it was either going to be Kenny Payne at Louisville or Calipari at Kentucky. That's where that was moving toward. But Keith Smart, Arkansas's top assistant, had a relationship there, having coached his dad in Cleveland. There was a relationship on the staff, and Musselman, of course, went back a ways too with some of the family members in the pro, just being in basketball as long as he was. And so there was some connectivity there. And then also DJ Wagner reportedly, I don't know if this is true. I don't even know if it's been reported. It may just be a rumor. Maybe he's got a girlfriend that plays on the USC women's team. I don't know the answer to that. I just know that's one of the things that was out there. If that's true, that would be something that might help persuade him to transfer to Southern Cal. But at any rate, just saying all of that, I can't rule him out because when we go through Kentucky's portal, we've already got Big Z on the board. I think again, Jordan Burks is in the plans to drop at any. There should be an announcement at some point that he's that he'll be a Razorback. I guess there may be finishing up with some. I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning is behind why that one hasn't been announced. And again, until they become public, I guess anything can happen to shift things. I think in that case, it'd have to be something blowing up or Calipari reversing field for his reasons. But nothing leads me to believe that's going on with Jordan Burks. I went through the more complicated situation with John L. Davis. But I do think when you go back to Kentucky's portal, you've got another big man in there, Ugonna Onyenso. We talked about him the other day. Was thought he was just going to get in the draft and stay there. 7-foot sophomore, big time rim protector, nearly 3 blocks per game in less than 19 minutes per game. Decent rebounder per minutes. Efficient guy, but he doesn't score a lot. But he went in the portal. I've got no momentum, no indications that Arkansas is in play there or who might be in play just yet for him. Psalm 2 Cyril, the 6'10", 252-pound. Some say he's 260 plus. I think out of the combine at Overtime Elite the other day, they had him weighed in at 252. Big time. He got some hops, man. 33-inch plus standing vert, nearly 40. I think nearly between 39 and 40-inch max vert. So a running start there. Maybe he's a guy. He's got opportunities to go pro. He did visit Georgia. We'll see. I've got again nothing that shows me any momentum that Arkansas might be in play for him, even though he did commit and sign with Calipari in that early period. Okay, so you've got Wagner, Onyenso, Cyril, wouldn't be in the portal, but he was one of the signed guys. And then going back to Kentucky's portal, a name I did leave out, but have talked about a lot, left out so far today, Adu Thero, the 6'8" wing. It looks like Hubert Davis in North Carolina have really been kind of trying to close the deal on him. We'll see about that. At 6'8", played 2 years for Calipari, I think just over 7 points, 5 rebounds, active guy. Some of his better games were earlier in the year, and his role seemed to change a bit as time moved on. I know he had a double-double, I think, in a loss to Kansas. Was one of his better games really early in the year, and then as things kind of moved on, he wasn't as productive. But I thought in the times he even played against the Hogs, he made a positive impact for the Wildcats because he kind of checks multiple boxes because of his size, length, activity. But we'll see if there's any way, Arkansas was among the schools listed in a Final Five for him. I think it was North Carolina, Arkansas. I think Pitt was in there, maybe Indiana, and there's somebody else. I'm trying to remember who else. Maybe a return to Kentucky. I think maybe that was the 5. He's a guy that I think sources I have had told me behind the scenes that there's been some effort to talk to him about coming to Arkansas, and I don't know how much that would impact what goes on with Burks or not. That's another thing I'm not sure about. So I don't know how those things interact with each other, or if they do at all. They may not at all. Just something that popped into my head. All right, we just hit 30 minutes. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please hit the subscribe button. If any of you were wanting me to come on here and make a prediction or tell you exactly when someone was going to commit and who it is, I can't do that. I think Arkansas is going to get one of the two, at least one of the two bigs that visited this weekend. Jonas Adu, all SEC last year at Tennessee, the league champs. And then Brandon Garrison, 2023 McDonald's All-American, did some good things as a freshman last year at Oklahoma State. I went through some of the stats, some of the games he had, but both of those guys would be great fits. Both listed at 6'11". Both are athletic. I didn't go through all the talking points about Brandon Garrison, but look, he's got a lefty hook. He can finish left or right. He can face up a little bit, 14, 15 feet and in. So he's a guy that brings some intrigue. Want to see him do a little bit more work on the boards, but again, was a true freshman. And so a lot of guys will make that leap, and you would think that Kenny Payne, by the way, I was told Kenny Payne was arriving to Fayetteville late in the week. I don't know if that was Thursday or Friday, but that's perfect timing if he wasn't already there when you're bringing in two big men visitors like that. So again, we're going to keep an eye. It's to me, it's commitment watch today. Could it be a Jordan Burks? If there is a surprise commitment, that's another thing. I don't know if we'll be surprised. So far, things have kind of been, they haven't, nothing's just blown us out of the water in terms of a commitment. I think we've seen some of these coming to this point, but there's only 4. So I don't know that we have enough of a precedent about how things play out and go down. Certainly not on the portal, because I think looking at Big Z, even though technically he's out of the portal, he's a Calipari guy. He played for him last year. So it's not quite the same as these other guys coming out of the portal. Other than maybe some of the Kentucky guys that we just talked about out of the portal, there might be some nuance on how things play out with them. I think certainly with Jordan Burks, we're kind of seeing that, because I think he's on board. It's just, when does it get announced? We're going to go through some of the other portal names. I want to hit some of these. We've talked about Cassian Pryor, Kayshawn Pryor. I don't know how to pronounce the first name. Kasean, Kayshawn Pryor, 6'9", 6'10" forward out of South Florida. Nice face-up game. I talked about Grant Nelson earlier. I guess there's a little bit of a comp there. 35% three-point shooter, 45% overall from the field. That's good. Over 80%, 81% from the free throw line. Like his game, 13 points I mentioned. I think 8 rebounds. So he's a good versatile. Maybe a stretch 4 if you want to call him that. And so I think he's a guy that I haven't seen any real movement in terms of predictions or where things stand with him. And we went through some of these other names that Arkansas has been, the 2 Duke 6'9" forwards that were McDonald's All-Americans 2 years ago. Not going to go through a lot with them again. Low stat guys, low opportunity guys at Duke. Haven't heard much related to Arkansas other than the initial contact. But this guy just hit the portal, and we haven't talked about him, Trezarian White. We talked about him in the regular season out of UNC Wilmington, and we knew Arkansas was facing, after losing to Greensboro back in November, when you were trying to close out December at home and you'd been up and down and kind of struggling. Arkansas had to face Wilmington, a team in earlier December that went into Rupp Arena and beat an unbeaten beat Kentucky on their home court, the Wildcats. So it was an upset win, but Trezarian White, 19.8 points per game last year, 6.8 rebounds, 1.6 assists. So you look at him, 20 points per game, nearly 7 rebounds, 6'7" forward, shooting over 49% overall from the field, 39% from 3. Yeah, give me that guy, 72% from the free throw line. But at 6'7", one of those guys that to me seems very versatile from when I watched him, because he's going to get on the glass, but he can score in a multitude of ways. You look at those shooting splits, they're really, really good. I mean, here's a guy that's close to the 50-40 part on the 2, when you look at overall and threes. The free throws aren't we're up there, but 72%. But, came into Bud Walton Arena and scored 28, and that was a track meet, man. I think it was 106-90. Arkansas won that home game, but they went on the road and beat Kentucky by 7 or 8 points, and he had 27 in that game. So this isn't a guy, when you look at his numbers, you go, well, he plays at Wilmington. How good is he against real competition? How much more real does it get than 2 SEC teams? And you split those games playing away from home, and the guy's averaging 27.5 points in those games. So big time player Trazarian White. We'll see where Arkansas, what happens there. I'm seeing more names still jumping in the portal, productive guys where they played at. And that tells me this late at the end of April, guys get in the portal and they're that quality. It tells me multitude of things. Guys are playing out their string on their NIL contracts, getting through that, getting through their schoolwork where they're at, and they're just trying to maintain until they, so that they they reap whatever they had coming through this season and finishing things out the right way before they move on in test waters or whatever they're doing, seeing what they can get in the NIL market. You're seeing some guys return to where they jumped in the portal from, but some of these higher level guys are still getting in. Wooga Poplar, how about that name? Wooga, 6'5" guard out of Miami. A lot of players departing there, but here's one. And Arkansas has made contact with him. I mentioned Trazarian White, one of the teams. Arkansas is one of the teams to reach out to him since recently hitting the portal. Wooga Poplar, 6'5" guard, Miami, nearly 14 points per game, almost 5 rebounds per outing, a little over 2 assists, 43% from the field, but almost 39%. We talked about Trazarian White, 39% from three. Poplar, 38.5%, so almost 39%. So another volume 3 guy, over 86% from the free throw line. Now this is interesting, 6'5" guard, Arkansas outreach. And then Kadari Richmond, I mean, this is a big time point. Lead guard at 6'6" out of Seton Hall. Arkansas has made contact, 16 points per game, 7 rebounds, over 5 assists, over 2 steals, 44% from the field, over 80% at the free throw line. Here's the big problem with him. 27% 3-point shooter. So he's not a 3-point shooter, but look at all the other things he does. Physical guy, lead guard. I mean, guys averaging, 16 points and 5 assists and going out and getting 7 rebounds. I don't care if he could shoot threes or not. He's doing everything else, it looks like. So here's another guy Arkansas has been in contact with. Now, we know Arkansas got late commitments, public commitments late in the week from backcourt guys coming in. And if you look historically, this is not like what's happened at Arkansas, where some freshmen play, some don't. The high-level guys did play at Arkansas, and they've always played for Calipari. And so I don't know when the timing is on some of these contacts. We know the timing just came out on when it was reported, these lists of schools that have reached out, but that doesn't mean some schools reached out weeks ago and some more recently, or what, or when they exactly entered the portal. That factors into it too. But the point being here is I don't know what kind of traction Arkansas really has with some of these guys that I just went through. But I did want to get through some of these names. But Poplar as an off guard, Kadari Richmond, you're getting size from both of those guys. John L. Davis at 6'4", Trazarian White, a small, 6'7", maybe a 3-4, wing 3-4 type guy, but a big rebounder in his own right. So, I look at these guys, these would all be great ads for John Calipari. These are all, to me, top shelf kind of guys, and it helps me understand why he and his staff have reached out to him. Again, how does what the 5-star backcourt group now, because you've got 3 of them basically, and they're all rated 5-star by somebody, all are top 25. You've got 6'6", 6'6", and of course the combo guard at 6'2" and Boogie Flam. But how does that impact some of these guys in the portal and looking at what their opportunities to play might be? So we'll keep an eye on that. I do want to say one thing we had talked about on the previous staff. Some people say, what's it worth mentioning? But I'm going to go ahead and just put it out there. We talked about that, that Cohen was the original, the first, we knew he was the first public commit to Eric Musselman. Followed him, East Coast guy, but followed Musselman out to USC. The commitment flipped. That was not somebody Calipari was going to pursue. But a local player, Cameron Hunter out of UCA, had committed privately to Arkansas. He'd committed privately to Arkansas. We were talking about a private commit. 6'3" guard, didn't play last year. Over the weekend, he announced that he's committed to Wisconsin in the Big Ten, and he was recruited by a lot of high majors. Private commit to Muss. They held on to making it public, probably because Muss was trying to get out of there. And Hunter was a guy that wanted to play at Arkansas. He was not going to follow him out there. And I think Musselman knew that, and I think that's why he didn't want that to be public because he wasn't going to stick around. And so, optics, whatever. At one point, Cameron told me he didn't mind me putting it out that he was the silent commit, but I just sat on that for a while. At any rate, that was Arkansas's private commit. Cam Hunter didn't play last year, 2 years in the Atlantic Sun at UCA here in Central Arkansas and Conway. Did a really good job there. And again, a lot of high majors were really after him, and he lands at Wisconsin. So we'll see how that goes for him. All right. Going to get into the Devo Davis thing only because I've got multiple sources telling me he's been privately committed for a few days to Oklahoma State. We'll see what happens there. I mean, I'm not 100% convinced on anything until it gets public. And even then, I'm only close to 100%. But I've got multiple folks telling me, and I trust it. He originally committed to Oklahoma State as a senior in high school and decommitted right before the November early signing period, flipped to Arkansas, signed, was the first of the 2020 kids to actually sign with Arkansas. The rest of them, Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, KK Robinson, waited till the spring. They were committed in the early period, but waited till the spring to actually sign. And that was during Musselman's first year. So 2019 is when Devo actually committed to Oklahoma State. I'm told he's committed there again. Of course, a new coaching staff. We'll see when his announcement actually comes out and is made public, or if he changes his mind. But I've got more than one people telling me, yeah, he's privately committed to him. So the new coaching staff there. So we'll see what happens with Devo Davis on that. But a great run at Arkansas. It's worth mentioning. Caleb Battle's been taking visits this past week. Where was it? I know Kansas State was one of them. TCU before that. Heard rumors he might be visiting Villanova, Philadelphia. Remember, he came to Arkansas from Temple, East Coast guy. So we'll see if he's actually visiting Villanova, if that's a real thing. I've heard maybe he is. Don't know that. But the other visits, he did put photos out on his social media. So we'll see what happens with Caleb Battle. And then it's been really quiet on Layden. By the way, Bay Fall committed to Kansas State. Went to the portal, was probably, I think, the last Hog to go in the portal, if I'm not mistaken, not that long ago. And he's now at Kansas State. We know Tremont Mark ended up going to Texas. Layden Blocker, it's been really, really quiet. It's been really, really quiet there. And I just wonder in the back of my mind, is there any? The last I heard, there wasn't any movement with him, with communications in terms of him staying at Arkansas. But that doesn't mean that that was the last I checked, and that was last week. I didn't check over the weekend. And so maybe, who knows? But he's the one guy things have been really, really quiet on. I do know some of the schools and coaches that were in the mix calling about him. Some that came to see him, but nothing that's been put out there public so that I can talk about it. Tucker Anderson, yeah, really good player. Played at UCA last year, freshman last year. I think he was ASUN freshman of the year. Led the Bears in scoring. Has visited Ohio State. That's kind of the team to watch, I think, there. We'll see. We'll see if there's anything else that shakes out with him. I mean, until guys make public announcements, you always wonder what's going on behind the scenes, especially with the portal. Again, it gets a little more wild with those guys. Those guys will commit without visiting campuses. They can sign as many financial agreements as they want. I know that sounds silly, but it's happened. It's happened. And Arkansas went through that lesson. They went through that lesson with Isaiah Moss. And they've had guys that they signed financial aid agreements, had committed. We talked about a silent commitment, 3 years ago? And a guy had signed, but there was some other stuff going on that where it might impact his ability to be eligible. So even though they went that far, it didn't pan out. And so he was out of there. So, I mean, Calipari's, to me, as the best recruiter there's ever been, he's a guy there's probably going to be less shenanigans and stuff like that. But at the same time, anything can happen. He doesn't win every recruiting battle either. Doesn't win them all. So you just keep an eye on some of these things. I think John L. Davis, again, from what I learned last week, nothing has changed in that information. I still think he's on board. However, keep an eye on the pro stuff. What's going to play out through May, unless he decides he's shutting it down, coming back to school, going to announce for Arkansas. There's other schools trying to get him. Kentucky's one of them. So how are these guys leveraging behind the scenes? what kind of communication are they giving these coaches in terms of, yeah, coach, I'm yours, but then someone sweetens a deal or something else happens, and now you're playing that back and forth game. I don't think Calipari's one of those guys that's going to yo-yo much with these guys with some of this stuff. I'm not saying that's happened with John L., but he's the kind of guy that can leverage some of that because schools are going to come after him. They're going to come after him and sweeten things if they can. We still don't know what kind of a Mark Pope, John Calipari battle Kentucky v. Arkansas in recruiting, trying to outdo the other. I think Calipari does what he does, regardless of where he's at, and the rest of it may be, sour grapes on the other side type of thing. But I don't think Kentucky's going to throw a bunch of money at a player just because Arkansas wants him. It's arguably the top player in the portal, and everybody wants him, so it's valid. To me, that's not about sour grapes or trying to one up. It could be, but I think the players, I think there's always a limit to someone's value, no matter how good they are and how much you think they can help you. And so that's also something to think about. Would Arkansas let go of a situation where they're being played for more? I mean, they might. So this is why I throw these caveats out there. All right, so we're about to wrap it up. 45 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I really appreciate it. We're going to just quickly go through some other stuff. Hit the subscribe button, by the way. On the high school front, Calipari and his staff has been busy. 5 offers really in the last week or so to the top 10 rated 2025 5-star guys. 2 of those, one of them's got a date out that he's going to visit coming right up. Another one's talking about he's going to visit Arkansas. But we'll start at the top. Number 1 rated player, AJ DeBonsa, 6'9", combo forward, wing, prolific prep. He's an East Coast guy, but he's at prolific prep in California. Got it picked up, announced an Arkansas offer just a few days ago. Another top 5 rated guy, Caleb Wilson, 6'8", 6'9", power forward. Picked up an Arkansas offer. I believe he's out of the Atlanta area. Picked up an Arkansas offer. Another top 10 rated guy, Malik Thomas. I think he's 7th on ESPN's list. A 6'4" guard out of Pittsburgh Lincoln High School. So another top 10 rated 5-star. Not only did he pick up an Arkansas offer, but he's publicly talking about now Arkansas is going to be one of his next 3 visits he wants to take. Don't have any dates yet on that. I'm trying to effort to get some idea when that might be. And then Darius Acuff Jr., I think he's a 9th rated prospect. I may have reversed a couple. I don't think I did. I think that's the correct order. At IMG Academy in Florida, by way of Detroit, he has announced a visit date to Arkansas, May 10th. So that's coming right up. We're less than 2 weeks away from that. So you've got 4. You have Will Riley, another 5-star guy in that class of 2025. Did not have Arkansas in his top 10, even though Musselman and his staff recruited him. Didn't have him in his final 10. He's cut it down to a final 5. And now Arkansas's in there because of John Calipari. Don't know if he'll set up a visit or if that's window dressing and he just wants him on there because it's Calipari on his list. Sometimes that stuff happens. I doubt it, though. I don't know. But it's very possible that Arkansas could be efforting a visit from Will Riley, another 5-star from 2025. I mentioned it the last time I came on, the in-state guys. There's 6 players in a top 100 in the national recruiting rankings, 3 in 2025, 3 in 2026. I didn't give out specific names on who the contact was with. I'm not going to do that today. You know most of the names. Terrion Burgess, class of 2025. Isaiah Seeley, class of 2025. Then there's Kellen Robinson, moved into ESPN's top 100 at 95 at Bryant, class of 2025. KK's younger brother. Then in 2026, it's top 15 rated 5-star JJ Andrews at a Little Rock Christian Academy. You've got top 35. ESPN moved him up to number 33. Jacob Lanier, 6'6" guard out of Maumelle. And then Aiden Chronister, 6'7" wing out of Rogers, rated 60th in ESPN's updated top 60 for 2026. So you've got 6 players, 3 in each class that are top 100 guys. One of them's a 5-star. And you've got several in there in Terrion Burgess, Jacob Lanier that are creeping up on that 5-star status. But having said all that, Arkansas staff, this new staff, I know it hasn't been named formally, a lot of these guys, but you've got some momentum in terms of just beginnings of outreach. Not offers yet, not visits set up, but just the beginning of outreach and contact. So we'll see where that goes. Some of these are things I've already hit on. But again, we're on commitment watch, I think, today. Again, Arkansas's had a commitment every Monday since Calipari was hired. It's a small sample size. Doesn't mean it'll happen today, but you just had two big time visitors. They're big men. And I don't think you want to, and Calipari apparently has a plan. He has an idea that he's getting both. I'm just telling you, he's preparing for both. We'll see if he gets both. I think he's going to get at least one of them. Would I be surprised if he got both? You know, mildly surprised because it's John Calipari. Because if he gets both, we're going to be going, you know what? We should have seen that he was going to get both. It's just hard to sometimes convince yourself when we know how this works. Sometimes guys playing the same size, similar position, and you're wondering, well, how are they going to please these guys in terms of what they're selling them on playing time, role, and then the NIL part. How much can you spread around and how much can you get guys on board? Calipari's been really good at it for years. Yeah, NIL is a different dynamic, but we're told Arkansas is one of the top players in the NIL game now. Maybe the top. I don't, I can't confirm any precise number exactly where it's coming from or what these players are getting. I had a Division I assistant coach call me over the weekend and say, Kevin, a lot of these NIL stuff you're seeing out here, he goes, they're just not right. It's a lot of puffing out chests. A lot of these players you're hearing these price tags on, they're just not even close to what they're actually getting. They don't mind it being out there and publicized that way. That's not close. And if you really think about it, the people that have to donate and put the money in for NIL, they didn't get rich without having some kind of return on investment. And the only return on investment in these situations really is pride in your program. And so we know boosters are chipping in. We know that there's NIL money, and we know that in some cases there's been a lot of it at times. So, but just always remember too that some of these things might be exaggerated. That's what I got from one Division I assistant coach. He was, sarcastically going through some of the stuff, and I listened to him because he's a long time assistant. One of the better one that was, I think at various times was some of these awards, places that recognize assistant coaching in college basketball. I think he won one or two of those top assistant awards in the country. So he's been around for a while. He understands the game. All right. So we're kind of running through some things again, just real quick. We're going to close it out. 3 commitments last week, 1 the prior week. What kind of haul are we going to see this week? We're going to see 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know the answer to that. Who might be coming in for visits? I'd love to know that. We might learn some of that stuff as news breaks today. There may be some of that stuff that's been on social media since I'm still on here nearly an hour later. I was going to try to go 35, 40 minutes, and I did it once again, but we're not going over an hour. We're not even going to get to an hour. We're going to shut it down right now. We're on Jonas Adu watch. We're on Brandon Garrison watch. We're on John L. Davis watch. Maybe. We'll see. Again, that one may play out for a while. It may not. It may be resolved this week. And then we're on Jordan Burks watch, on some of these other Kentucky portal guys. Some of the regular portal guys, names I just mentioned, is Arkansas get them in for visits soon. Who else is in the mix? Man, I think it's going to be another fun week. I think it's going to be another busy week. And I think we might see at least a commitment today. So far, there's not been multiple commitments in a day. Well, based on that track record, maybe we only hear one today, if any. Odds are if we hear one, it's just one today. But I'm fascinated by this Jonas Adu and Brandon Garrison situation, because even though I think they'll get at least one, I think John Calipari thinks he can get both. Keep that in mind. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens there. But we will get back on here. We're going to jump back on. If things really start to cook and shake up, we're going to get back in here and go through a lot of this stuff as it's happening, or as we learn it. So I appreciate you joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Before you leave, I'm leaving. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks again. Go over to hogville.net. Check out my recruiting tracker. Got a lot of this information I covered today, but I update it through the day, so you can go there to kind of refresh and see what else is popping since we've done this. But until next time, I'll see you then.